having the tools needed to build wealth effectively in these trying times is ever more critical as we navigate our new virtual reality. Black women have made significant strides, yet face more hurdles to financial success than any other group in the United States. For example, did you know more than 70% of women are either the sole or primary breadwinners of their families? More than 80% of Black mothers are the breadwinners in their household, compared to only 50% of white mothers. In 2016, the average white woman had 43,000 more in retirement savings than the average Black woman. The average white woman has nearly 10 times more non-retirement financial assets like stocks and bonds than the average Black woman. And the median wealth for a single Black woman is only $200 compared to nearly $16,000 for a single white woman. And new studies show that Black women bring higher levels of education, ambition, and diverse ideas to the workplace. So how can we ensure we are building our wealth even as we build our careers and family? We hear from many women that they want to get invested, but they're not sure where to start. Well, there's strength in sisterhood, and together we can change this dynamic through education, reassurance, and support. And more important than ever, we can learn how to build financial wealth and wealth management competencies that will provide the financial foundations you need to allow you to flourish. My name is Tosh, Ernest, Head of Wealth for Advancing Black Pathways, a bold new initiative that builds on the firm's existing efforts to help Black people chart stronger paths towards economic success and empowerment. Today, I am joined by Racquel Oden, Head of National Sales and Support for Chase Consumer Banking, and Mayra, Head of Content Strategy and Innovation for US Wealth Management in JPMorgan Chase. Racquel, please tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Tosh, really excited to be here with everybody today. I think what's pretty awesome about women getting together to talk about investing, it's so important as we think about the future of all that's important in the world that we live in. So for myself, I have the pleasure of leading national sales for our consumer business, which comprises both our investment business as well as our home lending and business banking business. And the importance of understanding how we bring the two together to make sure we're focusing on your personal finances as well as how you invest. Super excited to be here today.
Thank you, Racquel. Mayra, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Of course, and so glad to be here with you both today. My name is Mayra Cardoso, and I'm the Head of Content Strategy and Innovation for US Wealth Management. And in my day-to-day, I focus on developing content and digital experiences that help people connect with and manage their financial lives.
Thank you, Mayra. So let's get started on this great conversation. We'll start with you, Racquel. Black women entrepreneurs are amongst the fastest growing group of women-owned businesses. So how can they ensure that they are balancing investing with reinvesting in their business?
That is an amazing question because you're spot on. Black women are the fastest growing entrepreneurs. And it's really important that they understand the balance between the two. And I'd probably put it in three buckets of how I would look at it. And I think we all know we actually have to start with ourselves, our own personal finances. In order to be an entrepreneur, the first thing you have to do is be able to pay your day-to-day bills to allow you to take on that entrepreneurial business that you're talking about. That's pretty key. As part of that is super important is secondly, is then you start putting together your business plan for what you are going to create as a separate bucket, your business account. Because a lot of times entrepreneurs tend to commingle their personal with their business. And quite honestly, as you think about, as you balance and you try to build your business, it's going to be really important that you carve out those dollars that are very specific to your business and allow your personal life to be your personal life. And then if you add the third bucket, which is really important, if you think about what this really means, is you can't forget that you do have to think about your long term. Entrepreneurs tend to forget the fact that they need to be investing for themselves. And as part of that, you're going to have your personal, you're going to create your business account, but at the same time, you have to think about what can you tuck away for your long-term retirement needs or your child going away to college, right? There's still these other long-term views that you have to be able to balance. Now, day one, you may not be able to have the finance to cut across all of those, but you do want to think through the discipline and the principle to make sure you're thinking that way and start thinking about how you bucket your dollars according to those three components that I just shared.
Thank you, Racquel. It reminds me of when I was a kid and my mother used to make us put our pocket money into like the tithing envelope and then the saving envelope. And it's just having that mindset to really think about your money and compartmentalize it. So Mayra, we hear from many women that they want to get invested. What are some of the considerations women should take before even jumping into investing?
Yeah, thank you, Tosh. Great question. And one of the most critical ones to really think about and get started on your investing journey. And this is one that applies to pretty much everyone. And when you're thinking about starting to invest, there are a few key things that you should do to help get your financial house in order. One of which is know what comes in and what goes out. It is super important to be able to manage our income and our expenses. And if you can't measure it, it's very, very hard to manage it. And that will help you set up the pillars of a budget, a really important budget that will continue to help you plan through your both saving and investing journey. Another piece of that is once you know what's coming in and out, make sure that you're putting money aside in savings for any kind of emergency. We also sometimes call this a rainy day fund, and it's super important to have because when you start investing, you don't really want to pull money out of the market just to meet that short-term need. And I know that Racquel had mentioned that. So very important piece of this. The next is to pay off high interest debt. So when you think about high interest debt, this is typically, credit card debt. And the reason why that's important to take care of is that additional interest that you're paying can eat away at the possibility of you making more money in the market and or earning on your investments. You don't want that to cancel out. So if you're investing while you have high interest debt, you may not be making money because you're paying more in interest than you're making on the investment side. And then the final piece of this that I'll say is revisit often. Right? A budget is not just set once. You want to continuously revisit it. You want to make sure that you're staying on track, and that will help you set up for your both saving and investing journey.
So Racquel, back to you. What should women investors be considering when they look throughout the rest of this year?
That is a great question. I think we'd all agree this has been an historic and very unusual year overall. I call it the 2020 Pandemic Chronicles. And the reason why that is, we started out the year with very heavy market volatility. You add to it a global international pandemic. You think about all the social unrest that's actually happening in our country. We have a very, very important election coming up. You put all that together, it can almost paralyze you to think, what do I do? Do nothing. And so one of the things we always talk about that's important when you think about these moments, and there will always be these moments, you have to think long-term, because the importance of understanding what I consider your full-tone view of where you want to go from a goals-based perspective. What are your goals? And what hasn't changed for me personally, with all that is going on, my goals haven't changed. I still want to retire. I still want to continue to focus on my daughter's education. I still, hopefully one day, will afford that second vacation home. All these things that you listed before are still critical. And as you sit down with your advisor, or you sit down with, your spouse, as you sit down with your kids, you got to remind everybody, we may need to look at where we are as relates to the time horizon, how long it's going to take us to get to our goals. Because these moments definitely will be correction moments that may just mean it will take us to get a little longer to get to the goal, but don't forget the goal. And I think what's really critical about this as we go forward is I want everybody to always continue to think about things in the long term, because life will have these events. And you yourself will be so busy trying to get in and out of the market about these events, but I want you to really focus on your goals and just understand the time horizon of how long it may take you to attain them.
Such great advice, Racquel. And funny thing, I think that your goals and my goals are really similar. I too would like that first vacation home. I'm not quite at the second one yet, which leads me to my second question. So aside from retirement, what are some of the other long-term planning moves that women investors could start on right now today?
When I think about that long-term, one of the important things that I always make part of all the discussions I have, especially with Black women, is reminding all of us the importance of long-term investing with the ability to transfer wealth. So estate planning and thinking about that next generation. So decisions we make today, which primarily, absolutely, we've got to pay our bills and we got to make sure our day-to-day living is taken care of. We want to think about our retirement, but I also want us to think really long-term about turning down that wealth to what I just mentioned for my daughter, for example. And so one, it starts with that conversation at the table where we have transparency to just think about long-term with your kids, start having those conversations about what you expect of them and what you plan for them. Secondly, let's just make sure as you're dealing with those plans that we talked about, and you're thinking about your long-term goals, in there is about the preservation of your wealth and figuring out how you will pass that on. So whether that's your real estate that you're owning, right, your 401k, your stocks, I think most important thing that we don't do a good enough job about is just talking about it very early, because we tend to think it's a taboo to talk about our finances with our kids and our spouses, and ensuring that we understand what we want our money to do, whether we're here or not. I really think it's important that we have the conversation and we understand investing is a conversation that should be had with the whole family.
Thank you, Racquel. I absolutely agree. I didn't learn anything about investing until I was out of the home. And right now, I really regret it. So start young, start early, start to have those conversations. So talk to us, like, what are some of the strategies? You mentioned there's a pandemic, the stock market volatility. There's just so much going on right now. What are some of the strategies to manage priorities for Black women investors? What are some of the tips you can share with us?
I think the tips don't change. And I keep reminding everybody, and as you said, like, there are always going to be these events that happen. And I think one, basic budgeting, right? Don't forget that, right? More importantly, can you pay your bills today, right? And I think you lay out that, and do you need to cut back on spending? I mean, that is, believe it or not, the biggest trigger we have, right? Is ensuring that, do we have enough that we can actually pay what we have in front of us? How much should we be saving, right? Because we all know the importance of that savings account. And based on that, then you start thinking through, what can I afford to put towards my long-term investing? What are the emergency dollars I don't need on hand day to day? And that's how I think about investing, right? These are the dollars you don't need on hand day to day. Because the idea of pulling out of the market to go pay for something is obviously not a good strategy. That's actually not the way you should be looking at it. And that's why you have a checking account, a saving account, and then your investment account. And I would think of it in those three ways, right? And your savings, your checking account is your basic day-to-day living. Savings is what you put away for what I call that unexpected moment, right? And you kind of look at your salary and it goes back and forth if it's 3 months worth of salary or 6 months worth of salary on hand, should these life events happen that are unexpected. And then there's the long-term stuff that you can start putting away that really allows me to think about my retirement, you know, kids going away to school, and these longer term horizon moments that allows me to have some rigor around how I'm continuing to make sure that I'm funding these three type of accounts appropriately.
Those are just some really great tips there. Thank you so much, Racquel. And Mayra, a question for you. We hear from many women that they want to get invested, but are not sure where to start. What are some of the tools they can use to both start investing and learning more about investing?
Yeah, Tosh, and I think that's a super important question. I mean, when you look at the world of investing, just think 10 years ago, right? And where we are today. There has been so much that has been done in the way, thanks to tech and technology specifically, in the way of helping us have more access to investing options, right? And that happens in a few different ways. One is there are many more different ways and many more options that allow us to invest on our own terms. The second is that we are able to access investments at a much lower cost on average today than we could have 10 years ago. And the third is that it's all in the palm of our hands, or it can be, right? So you can get invested on the go. It's easier. You can do it from your phone. And with all of this, it's an awesome opportunity basically for us to start getting more and more involved. That being said, with the influx of options also comes the importance of making a good choice, right? We want to be able to work with, an investment that allows us to focus on our long-term goals, right? So when you think about a lot of these different apps and accessibility that technology has allowed us to achieve, the risk is also that you get these sort of quick moments of focus where people want to just kind of put money into the market and are hoping to see immediate returns. And like Racquel had mentioned, investing is really for longer term goals. So it's super important that when you're thinking about how can I get started today, that you work with an app or an organization that really puts in mind and keeps top of mind this idea of positive investing habits and long-term investment behavior, which is super important. And I think the last piece here, in terms of resources, the reality is there's so much, there's so much that you could learn about the world of investing, and you still wouldn't know all of it. I've been in the industry for almost a decade now. And I think one of the most important things that I had to learn along the way is do not let perfection get in the way of progress, right? We can take little baby steps to get where it is that we want to be with our investments. But if you wait until you know absolutely everything there is to know about investing, you'll never get started. So approach it the same way you approach learning a new language, for example. You pick up pieces of vocabulary and grammar, and then you practice. Practicing is key. So I would say that that's super important. And when you think about the resources, we actually have a few over in the resource center, resource tab here. So feel free to access that and learn more, empower yourself, and also be ready to take some action.
Thank you so much, Mayra. I think that one of the things I picked up you said there is do not let perfection get in the way of progress. That is so important. Just start small. I myself only started investing, even though I've been in this industry, when we launched the You Invest app, because it just made it so easy to get invested. And now I'm not going to tell you my portfolio weighting, but I'm kind of proud of myself because the tips make it really easy to figure out, you know, what to invest in and do your own research. So another question for you, Mayra. Despite making up 13% of the US population, Black people constitute less than 3% of the wealth of this country. So how can Black women up their investing game to make up for this gap?
I think, number one, you kind of just said it. By knowing that stat is a great start, right? Once we know the differences, once we know the problems, we can address them. So thank you for sharing that information. The other is being mindful of, we have savings, we have investing. I think of them as partners in helping us achieve our long-term goals, right? Each plays a specific role. And as Racquel mentioned earlier, your savings, it's for that day when you have an emergency, et cetera. And we also sometimes call it a rainy day fund because when it rains, sometimes it pours. So you really want to be able to have access to that money on a day-to-day. But when it comes to your investments, you want to think about that as your way of building long-term wealth. So if you want to build long-term wealth, you can't just save. You have to save and invest. And that's why I consider them partners. And when it comes to women specifically as well, we have to invest more of what we save. Say it again, invest more of what we save overall. After you've gotten your emergency fund set aside, et cetera, invest more of what you save because it really allows us to achieve greater wealth over the long term than just saving alone will. And that goes a long way. It's about making it a habit. And I think I'll go back to digital tools really quickly because today what you can do is split it, right? Let's say you get a paycheck, pay yourself first. I think we've talked about that in some areas as well in the past. It's super important. And, I have to remind myself of that. So pay yourself first. And then when you think about your investments, put that as a part of your regular, savings and investing habit. Set a rule, split your check and contribute some to your savings, contribute some to your investing. And if you do that on a regular basis, it also takes the guesswork out of finding the perfect time to contribute. Because as we say overall in the industry, and it's a very well-known term, it's time in the market, not timing the market. It is very, very difficult to find the perfect entry point and to sell at the best time. So really just think about making it a habit and doing it consistently, contribute to your long-term goals.
Absolutely. And
hey, Tosh, can I add to that? Because I think Mayra really brings
it up. Of course, yes.
Because also get to the point where she just shared with you kind of how you look at it on the long-term investing, but there's digital tools, where you can be self-directed. And there also comes a point where you probably potentially could need professional advice. And I don't think everyone should feel comfortable making the ask to really sit down with a professional because this is complicated and we don't want to pretend that it's not. But I love the rigor that you're saying how we need to be looking at how we bucket our money. What do you do with it? And I think between self-directed and seeing all these amazing things that we can do ourselves, also sitting down with someone who can actually give you guidance on, what you should be doing with it. And then I think thirdly, to that point, I love this session. I think as Black women, just in general, we've just got to talk about it. There's no secret sauce. There's no I've got 20 years of experience, Mayra's got 10 years of experience. It doesn't really matter, right? We're all living and we all understand it's important of how do we manage our finances. And I think as women, we have to be super supportive of this dialogue and spending the time. So I always start with education, and let's educate each other. Let's empower each other to have chit chats and sessions about just the basics of finances. So it isn't a mystery, because I think that's the number one reason we probably don't know as much about it. But I will tell you, we know a lot about it, because you just said African-American women, 70% are the CEO of their households. So we do know, and it's important that we do have these conversations.
Yeah, and I just want to agree 100% with everything Racquel just said. It is super important to also bring these conversations to our friends, to our families, and said this in the past, but let's make money talk, brunch talk. Let's make money talk, call your friend, talk just to talk. Let's bring it way into the mainstream in a way that it becomes second nature, because that is also how we will become more comfortable and continue to spread that knowledge throughout.
Absolutely. Thank you both. Really insightful. And I think let's just stay on the topic of digital apps. A lot of people have been investing themselves these days and have either made or lost money. So what's the difference between using an app yourself and working with an advisor? And how do you know when to do which? And since you're both, so invested in this, I'll ask both of you to share your thoughts. Why don't you start, Mayra?
Yeah, I think Racquel hit on this just a couple seconds ago, in that digital apps are great and they're super important, particularly for empowerment, for having access to your money on the go, for being able to have a snapshot of how you are doing financially at any given moment. And also to help you learn, to forge a path of being comfortable with exploring investing on your own or learning about new concepts. I think there's also so much value in sitting down and talking to someone, and I'm sure Racquel will add to this, particularly around, big moments in our lives or where things start to get a little bit more complex. But I think just taking it back to the basics, it's digital apps give you access in the palm of your hand, right? And that's timely. It's something that you can look at every day if you wanted to. Sometimes looking at our money every day can actually make us a little bit more nervous. So just be mindful of that and keep your emotions in check. But it has that ability to give you that visibility, which is super important to making sure that we're not overspending, making sure that we're contributing to our goals in the right way or in the priority that matters most to us. But at a certain point, there gets to be a higher level of questioning or how do I develop a plan around this? How do I get more holistic? And I think that's where it's helpful to chat with someone. And I'll shoot it over to Racquel to add.
I would echo your comments exactly. I think, the answer is you need both, right? There's no one or the other. And I think that's really what we're ultimately saying. There are pieces that you should have at your fingertips at all times. And as things get more complex and you need more support, it's the idea that you could be sitting down with a professional to help give you that guidance. And I think the combination, and I think the beautiful thing is that's the world we live in today. If you want to walk into one of our branches and meet with somebody personally, or you want to pick up your phone and have the ability to kind of see where you are, what you're doing, and make some decisions on your own, I think it's a beautiful combination of them both. But I think what's key about it is the idea that you are, one, having an understanding of what it is you're trying to accomplish. Whether you're doing it on your phone or you're talking to a professional, what is your end state goal? What are you trying to accomplish? And I think what's really important for you to answer that question for yourself. And as you're looking at all of this, once you've answered the question, be able to hold yourself accountable and standpoint. If this is the goal I set for myself, how am I doing towards tracking that goal? And what's really cool is digitally, you'll kind of see how you're progressing to the goal, as well as you'll be sitting down potentially with the professionals helping guide you on what are the things you need to be doing and how to grow your portfolio. So I love the world we live in. And my answer is I love the fact that you can do both. Actually, it gives us less excuses. But I do think it's the ability to have what I call a digital accountability coach as well as a professional accountability coach. It all comes down to accountability, and you need both.
That's awesome. It reminds me of something my mother would always say to me, which is that wisdom is found in many counselors. So there are many tools out there. Make sure that you're not just, in fact, I was at church the other day and an elderly couple came and told me that they wanted to invest all their retirement savings in silver of all things. So of course, of course, I pointed them, in fact, to your team, Racquel, to get better advice. So don't
and
get
the key there, simple key, the key was diversification.
Yes.
Right? It's not diversification.
Diversification, both in thought and in knowledge. So make sure that you're getting both the digital apps, but also the in-person advice. And so our last question to wrap this up, this has been a great conversation. Thank you, Racquel. Thank you, Mayra, for both of your insights. If you had to leave the audience with one nugget, what would it be? Let's start with you, Racquel.
One nugget. All right. I think there's a lot that we covered here, but I'd probably start with the basic, which is, plan for the unexpected. And the reason why I pause there for a second, as we've had this conversation, I don't want to be removed from the fact that there's a lot going on in the world right now. There's a lot of changes that are happening in our lives, personally, professionally, and just from our personal health with all that's happening. And so right now, what 2020 has taught me, or we haven't seen it, people always said you can, always think about unexpected moments. This was a year of unexpected. And what comes with that is an awakening of ensuring that you're prepared for these moments. And then at the same time, you're taking the pause to have the conversation. I will tell you, with the time that I've had, I've never spent more time looking at my investments and my personal finances, even looking at my cable bill to say, why am I paying all this money for this? I'm re-looking at, very importantly, my insurance plans, right? I'm really digging in because I'm using this moment of time of reflection to say, was I financially sound in this moment? And how do I make sure for the next unexpected, I feel financially sound?
And thank you, Racquel. And Mayra, one nugget.
Yeah, and I think Racquel hit on reflection, right? I think that's such an important concept. When I think, and Tosh, you touched on this earlier when you talked about, not necessarily having these investment and or savings conversation in your home growing up, et cetera. I think the one thing that really sticks with me is this idea of understanding that the way that we interact with money, our relationship with money, is so ingrained by what we've seen by others around us, friends, family, et cetera. And we absorb a lot of that. We absorb a lot of that over time, and taking a moment to reflect and say, what drives my spending behaviors or habits, and what makes me feel comfortable? What makes me feel excited? How can I think about my future in a way today that feels like I'm focused on 30 years from now? I think one of the things we hear a lot is that, people can wait to save for retirement. I would just kind of bring that back up and say, invest in you today for the you that you want to be every single day from here on out. And I think it's super important because it allows us to be more connected with something that feels a lot further away. So one is reflect. I agree with that wholeheartedly. The other is, know your money story. Know where your fears come from around money, your discomfort about talking about it, your fear of not understanding investing. Know where that is, where it comes from, and dig deeper into it and find a way to act and overcome that. And the final thing, and I know you said only one, but I can't leave it without mentioning this too, is just be your own accountability partner as well when you don't have someone else there. I think when we look at our spending, and if anyone were to ask you, how much do you spend on XYZ? You would give an estimate, but when you actually crunch the numbers, it is a lot higher probably than you wanted to think and you wanted to admit. And in that overspending, potentially there are a lot of opportunities for saving and investing. So that's where we can kind of start there. And that's where I think the whole journey begins. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, I want to thank you both, Racquel and Mayra, for this great conversation. I want to thank our audience. Thank you for being with us, our partners at Black Enterprise, and from us at JPMorgan Chase. Take care and goodbye. Be safe, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Be safe. Bye.
Be safe.
Take care.